and good evening, depending where you are. I'm Ana Lucia Jacome, Senior Project Leader and Human Rights Expert at the Division for People and Social Inclusion at UNITAR. I remain at your disposal in case you want to explore possible synergies on aging and older persons learning initiatives. I encourage you, dear participants, to send your questions or comments to the speakers by using the Q&A Zoom tab. To start, I give the floor to Dr. Ebru Kanant-Sokulu, Deputy Director of the Division for People and Social Inclusion at UNITAR and Deputy Director of the International Training Centers for Authorities and Leaders, CIFAL Global Network. Please, dear Ebru, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ana Lucia. It's a pleasure for me to join you today. And we understand that the topic of our fourth event, the intersectionality of discrimination faced by older persons, is greatly timely and, of course, a very important topic, as the older persons face a complex interplay of discrimination based on their age, gender, race, sexual orientation, disabilities, and several other factors. And this intersectionality can lead to unique challenges and, of course, barriers that are often overlooked. And in this regard, it is important to empower different stakeholders through knowledge about the intersectionality of discrimination faced by this group. Is very crucial in highlighting the unique and layered form of bias and exclusion they experience, which can, we believe, that inform effective interventions. So when we recognize intersectionality, dear colleagues, dear guests, esteemed panelists, policies can be designed to address these specific needs of various groups within the older population. And if we give some examples, for instance, persons with disabilities and older immigrants are also a great concern within this topic. And this approach ensures that resources and support systems are distributed more equitably and improving the overall quality of life for older adults. And however, without awareness, policies risk being also too generic, leaving some of the most vulnerable older adults without the assistance they need. And they might also lack sources for effective, impactful implementation. So distinguished guests, again, panelists, and all the attendees from different parts of the world to this important webinar that we gather here today for, we aim to unpack these complexities. And this conversation is particularly important as societies across the world are aging, and however, our policies and social services, even cultural narratives, often fail to reflect the nuanced experiences of older adults, and especially those from marginalized communities, those who face with certain disasters across the world. And we believe that today our discussion with the esteemed group of experts, we'll hear from them. Each will bring a wealth of knowledge on this issue and with a great diversity of perspectives. And they will also help us explore critical questions such as like, how can we break down harmful stereotypes, systemic barriers? What steps are necessary to take? Maybe the most importantly, how can we create a future where aging is celebrated rather than feared, and where intersectionality is recognized in both policy and practice? Before we begin, I'd like to emphasize that this conversation we all have a role in, whether as policymakers, advocates, caregivers, individuals, experts, we can all contribute to creating a more just and equitable world for older persons. And I strongly believe that today's dialogue is a step forward in that journey. Thank you for joining us again, and I look forward to important insights and solutions, suggestions that will emerge from our discussion today. And lastly, I also thank my colleague Ana Lucia and all the colleagues at UNITAR who brought us together. I wish everyone a very fruitful discussion. Thank you very much, Ana Lucia.
Thank you, dear Ebru. Without further ado, it's an honor to introduce His Excellency Ambassador Juan Esteban Aguirre, his former Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Paraguay. Ambassador Aguirre is a diplomatic with sound experience on different fields, in particular on human rights. He was the former permanent representative of Paraguay to the UN in Geneva. He was also the vice president of the UN Human Rights Council in 2015. In addition to this post, Ambassador Aguirre has held positions as Paraguay's ambassador to Canada, the United States, and Brazil, and of course, Ecuador. His Excellency also spent part of his career working for the United Nations for the population with the governments of Colombia, Venezuela, and Ecuador, and as representative of the United Nations Population Fund with the government of Guatemala. His Excellency also worked as program officer. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ana Lucia. I always forget to unmute the technology problem. And a very quick hello to my fellow panelists and to all of you who are listening. Let me start by thanking UNITAR in the person of Alex Mejia and, of course, Ana Lucia Jacome for inviting me to participate in this ongoing effort to bring forth and highlight the rights, the needs, the interest of older persons in this present and evolving context of shifting demographic growth or ungrowth, if you wish, in this context of startling new technology and science, in this context of instant digital communication and perception, and of unforgiving climate change. And I'm doubly grateful because I am myself a fortunate older person, I would say a privileged older person who, invited to this space, is allowed to convey our interest as a group to continue contributing to the well-being and development of our countries, our communities, and why not, our very planet at this present time and for the future and on an ongoing basis. But as things stand now, our contribution will take some doing. As a key goal of our ongoing UN decade of health aging very well puts it, we need to change how we think, feel, and act towards age and aging, and promote positive attitudes, not only from others, but from ourselves. To start, we need to stop being a chronically invisible segment of population, as our human rights expert for older persons has well said. And in terms of rights, beginning with us, it must be understood and fully accepted that human rights do not diminish with age, that older persons have the same rights as everyone else, and that these rights are the basis of our independence, participation, care, self-fulfillment, and above all, dignity. And that addressing, as Dr. Ebru just said, the discrimination and marginalization of older women because of their age and sex, the additional barriers older persons with disabilities face to accessing healthcare, social services, and legal protection, the systemic discrimination and exclusion of older people because of their racial and ethnic backgrounds, the limited access to social services of poor older persons who lack social protection, and the lack of services and transportation for older persons living in remote, isolated rural areas. It should be made clear and understood that all these factors need to be addressed to protect the rights of older persons and ensure their dignity and well-being. Because all these are factors that contribute to our invisibility and to being considered disposable when social services come under pressure, as we regretfully saw during the COVID-19 pandemic. Biological or chronological age alone does not explain decline and inactivity. but living under harsh conditions, lack of food, conflict, natural disasters, socioeconomic disparities, social isolation, these lead to illness, frailty, weakened abilities, dependency, more than age alone. In other words, being 60 or 70 or 75 does not necessarily compromise our ability or adaptability in looking after our needs and interests, but adverse life conditions certainly do. And let me say it again, our human rights do not diminish with age. Older persons have the same rights as everyone else. And one thing is certain, we do need to make some special efforts to enhance the protection of our human rights. It is well known, and it has been reported to the General Assembly of the United Nations and to the Human Rights Council that the existing international and regional framework lacks specific and comprehensive obligations in relation to the right to equality and non-discrimination in old age, including age as a prohibited ground of discrimination. Existing treaty bodies, special procedures have not and cannot provide coherent mechanisms for the recognition and redress of the human rights of older persons. Fortunately, these gaps in the protection of human rights have been identified and classified in a prolonged effort and discussions over many years by member states, civil society, United Nations experts, and organizations working in the context of the open-ended group on aging. And it must be said, based on the horrific experience of older persons during the pandemic, the group has finally completed its assigned task and has proposed to the General Assembly a non-exclusive, legally binding instrument for securing older persons' human rights and the development of additional protocols to existing human rights instruments to further guarantee this protection. And sometime during its 79th session, I think it's the ongoing session, the General Assembly has decided to convene a high-level meeting for the discussion of this international legally binding document and the rights of older persons. I have to say, it is a major step forward because we cannot deny the impact of the 1979 Convention condemning discrimination against women and the need to protect their human rights, of the 1989 Convention, by which we recognize that the children also have rights to be protected. And in 2006, the convention clearly stating that persons with disabilities have rights which must be protected. So if we are to become visible, older persons need to clearly express recognition that we are holders of human rights fully entitled to participate in any decision regarding our interests and our needs. Most hopefully, this international mechanism or instrument would include the right to participate in policy-making processes as part of participation in public and political life, and would provide a guide to governments on how to make their policy-making processes inclusive of older persons, and in line with human rights standards. Participation in the implementation, monitoring, and reporting mechanisms established by a convention, including at the national level, would provide a way for older persons to hold their governments to account, and the recommendations from these mechanisms would feed into the policy and reform processes. And most essentially, referring to these possible reporting and monitoring mechanisms, and especially with regard to the compounded impact of intersectional obstacles, It is an urgent task to collect data on older persons. Older persons are still invisible in terms of available data and lack of aggregated data. Data on older persons, as has been fully recommended, disaggregated by age, sex, and other relevant characteristics, are essential to the development of legislation, policies, and practices that effectively address the situation of older persons. And this data should be also disaggregated by age cohort to better understand the situation of older persons at different ages, especially as it is a fast-growing segment of population. Our individual capacity and ability to make positive contributions to society should be evaluated if we are to be made an articulate part of decision-making and planning processes. Already, what we have lived through, and our accumulated experience will be valuable guidance as we get together with other generations to face our common and future challenges. And thank you once again for letting me participate. Thank you, Ana Lucia.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thanks for highlighting several frontier issues that represent additional challenges to older persons, such as climate change, rural and urban areas, different contexts. There is no doubt that different contexts can worsen the situation of this group and societies as a whole. The visibility of their needs and strengths, as you highlighted, represent the cornerstone of the discussions at local, regional, and international levels. So it's important to pay attention to these important aspects. Thank you, Ambassador. Now, it's my pleasure to welcome our dear colleague, Ms. Loli Gaitan. Her expertise focuses on international policy analysis, socioeconomic development, dynamics, and partnership relations. She's a Digital Inclusion Program Officer at the International Telecommunication Union, ITU. Her work focuses on crafting and rolling out initiatives that highlight the transformative potential of ICTs to uplift and empower everyone in the digital space. She provides technical assistance to members and other stakeholders, helping them align with the Sustainable Development Goals to ensure inclusive access to and use of information and communication technologies by all people, especially vulnerable groups. Please, Loli, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ana Lucia, and hello, colleagues. Hello, everyone. So it's a real pleasure to be part of this meeting at ITU, and in particular, the Office of Telecommunications Development. Let me tell you, we have a dedicated area on digital inclusion. And I must say that one of our key strengths is that we support member states, as you mentioned it, Ana Lucia, in the introduction, to address digital inclusion from an intersectional perspective. So we do have, let's say, our groups defined, 5 groups that we work with: women and girls, youth, people with disabilities, the older people, and also remote and indigenous communities. But what we have seen over the years, and also in the interactions that we have with our members, is that the real value is when we work and we put this intersectional lens. So let me just give you an example. So I'm going to call this person Andrea. Andrea is a woman of 70 years old. She's visually impaired and is living in the Amazon in Colombia, which is my country of origin, by the way. This case of Andrea is only one of the cases of many million cases in the world, and are worth exploring and are worth finding solutions for her and the other women. And in our case, in the case of ITU and BDT and the digital inclusion, we want to make these women digitally included in the society. And we want her and all of them benefiting of the digital technologies. So you might ask, how are we going to do this? So it's a huge effort and a big and lengthy process. But we support our member states with the designing of policies and regulations with a focus specifically on intersectionality. So we ensure that Andrea that particularly is facing additional challenges such as disability and living in a rural area could receive targeted support from their governments. So just coming back to the focus of our session today, I think it's not a secret that when we focus on age and gender, these combinations sometimes create unique challenges. And among the challenges, and in particular when it refers to the digital gender gap challenges among older women, unfortunately, the numbers are not in our favor. So older women are underrepresented in internet use globally. With this, we also know that they are significantly less likely to possess digital skills compared to men. In the specific regions, we have seen that more than 60% of older women lack basic digital literacy, and that makes them harder for them to benefit from online services, social connections, and economic opportunities. Access to technology is another component critical in the digital gender gap. And GSMA, which is the Global Association of Mobile Operators, they release yearly a report on the mobile gender gap report. And the latest one shows that 14% of women over 50 years old in low and middle income countries, they are owning a smartphone, compared to 27% of men for the same age group. So there are many reasons why we have the digital gender gap and why this is happening. But I would say that one of the many reasons are historical, sometimes cultural, and really entrenched social norms are one of the reasons why this is happening. So older women in a lifetime of gender equality often have fewer financial resources. So because of that, they cannot afford technologies and they cannot afford to pay for a digital education or training in digital skills. And also the other reasons is that there is a lack of tailored digital tools. So nowadays, all the new apps, every new technology is designed with the younger users in mind. So what happens with the older people, in particular with older women such as Andrea, with a disability and with probably low literacy. So they find these tools very difficult to use. And this really exacerbates their exclusion from essential digital services like I was hearing the ambassador before, like the telehealth, the online banking, or e-governance. So all this lack of digital literacy, we have seen how is impacting strongly the societies, but also at the economic level. So there are heavy repercussions that are impacting not only the women, not only Andrea, but also the national economies. And I would like to give you a quick example, which is the cyber abuse and the financial fraud that we all know this happened. In particular, the numbers increased during COVID. Women over 60 years old are increasingly targeted by scam and cyber abuse. We have all received, perhaps at some point, this messaging where you click in this message, you can they can get all your bank details. So just coming to a recent report from the FBI, they just proved empirically that from 2022 to 2023, there was an increase in 11% of this cyber abuse and financial fraud for older people in general. So this is an increase of totaling more than 3.4 billion that was lost in terms of financial fraud for older people. So this is just a small example of why digital inclusion, in particular for older persons, is one of the priorities for us. We recognize as ITU this challenge, and we are working on digital safety initiatives, which encompasses different initiatives at the level of advocacy, at the level of digital skills training, and also promote accessible ICTs and technologies. So I think I would say that as ITU, we are lucky enough to have different members. So we have the governments, we work closely with the sector members, which are the private sector, and we also have the academia members. So we really try with them to come together and advocate at national, regional, and international levels to ensure that older persons, and in particular, the cases like Andrea, are included in the digital strategies and promote accessibility and equity. I think I will stop here, and I of course would like to share more of our work if you are of interest, and we are open always for collaborations and partnerships. This is something that we always we cannot do this work alone. So I think it's great to see if we can move forward together. Thank you so much, Ana Lucia. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Loli. We commend your efforts as a ETU to bridging paths between digital literacy and older women, multi-stakeholder union to this end is quite necessary, as you explained. Thank you and all the best.
Thank you.
Now, to continue, it's a pleasure to warmly welcome Ms. Ana Chaviera. She's Senior Specialist at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Poland. She also represents ENHRI in GANHRI, Working Group on Aging and Human Rights of Older Persons, in the role of Vice Chair of this group. She's a sociologist and a Senior Specialist in the Department of Equal Treatment in the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights in Warsaw. Since 2011, she organizes social research on discrimination based on grounds of gender, disability, age, sexual orientation, ethnicity, and beliefs. Her tasks include also monitoring the state's policy on aging and the works of the UN Open-Ended Working Group on Aging that just finished their mandate in New York. I guess your role, Anna, will continue here in Geneva. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ana Lucia, for your kind introduction and for inviting me to take part in this important event. And our National Human Rights Institution, NHRI in short, holds also a mandate of an equality body since 2011, and therefore the topic of intersectionality and intersectional discrimination occurs in the work of our office quite frequently. Also in regard to age discrimination, which, as we acknowledge, has its roots in ageism. And first, let me recall the definition of ageism from the Global Report of Ageism published by WHO in 2021. Ageism refers to stereotypes, how we think, prejudice, how we feel, and discrimination, how we act, directed towards people on the basis of their age. It can be institutional, interpersonal, or self-directed. From the perspective of an NHRI, National Human Rights Institution, erasing the first type of ageism, institutional ageism, is particularly important as it refers to the laws, rules, social norms, policies, and practices of institutions that unfairly restrict opportunities and systematically disadvantage individuals because of their age. And on this type of ageism, I would focus in my presentation. And I would like to give you examples of the discrimination based on the intersectionality of gender and age, migration and age, and also discrimination based on age and the fact of living in rural areas in Poland, as Mr. Ambassador also mentioned this in his presentation. But before going to the examples, I would like to very shortly give you an overview of the legal framework which gives basis for our analysis at national level. First of all, in the Polish Constitution, there is Article 32, which states that all persons shall be equal before the law, all persons shall have the right to equal treatment by public authorities, and further, that no one shall be discriminated against in political, social, or economic life for any reason whatsoever. This is important because besides this very general clause, there is still very little done about preventing age discrimination in the legal framework in Poland explicitly. The Act of Equal Treatment of 2010 prevents discrimination on age only on labor market. In other areas like education, access to social and health services, etc., there is no explicit protection against discrimination based on age. And this is also a reason why Commissioner for Human Rights of Poland advocates for a convention on the rights of older persons, which would be a new legally binding instrument on the global, that means UN level, and it would provide human rights standards in a broader scope also in regard to intersectionality. And examples which we tackle today should be taken into account in this debate on those standards. Regarding the intersectionality based on age and migration, I would like to indicate the gap in the legal framework that doesn't allow older persons to apply for permanent residence in Poland, the older migrants. This is also an example of indirect discrimination, as there are legal provisions which allow to apply for permanent residence for migrants if you would like to study in Poland or if you would get married in Poland. And one could say that those provisions are for everyone. But in the real life, older persons still rarely begin studies or get married. This gap posed a threat to older people who fled from Ukraine at the beginning and during the ongoing war initiated by Russia. Only because there are still some temporary legal regulations regarding support for refugees from Ukraine, they can stay in Poland. But when the war will end, it still might happen that older persons will be forced to go back to Ukraine regardless of the state of their health and the fact if they still have a house or it was destroyed and there is no place they can return to. Therefore, there is a need to formulate additional legal protection for older persons in the humanitarian crises or conflicts and provide solutions which would allow them to live in dignity in a place they will choose to stay. And for examples, which refer to intersectionality based on age and gender. As an equality body, Commissioner for Human Rights is obliged to conduct research on discrimination. Last year, Commissioner focused on access to social services for older persons living in rural areas. The report will be published probably in late November, but I can share already some findings of this report. And public transportation is one of the services which is crucial for older persons in rural areas. Timely and regular connections between towns and villages might decide upon the access to health services, educational opportunities, and other kind of services offered by local communities. And the results of our research has shown that in the case of lack of public transportation, older women living in the rural areas might be in worse position than older men because of the previous cultural, social reasons, conditions that it were men who drove cars in the families. And after the death of a husband, a woman remains without a car, and that means without possibility to move around independently. And there is, I would like maybe very shortly also indicate an example in a broader manner, which refers to intersectionality on labor market. And as you heard, this is the only area where in Poland it is forbidden to discriminate people on labor market because of their age. And it is that we have law which makes that it is discriminatory to dismiss someone from work only because they reached retirement age, and it refers both to men and women, but there are different retirement age for men and women. This is 60 for women and 65 for men. And according to European law, it is discrimination based on gender when someone would dismiss from work a woman because of reaching retirement age. And therefore, it's clear that it's discrimination based on gender, but it is also because of age. But what's important, we as the Office of the Commissioner for Human Rights ask people in Poland how they perceive it, the difference in the retirement age for men and women, as if it's discrimination against women or against men. And the outcome of 2020 first survey is similar for both sexes. 42% of Polish society treats it as discrimination against men, and 52% do not see it as discrimination against men. And 39%, so also around 40%, sees it as treated as discrimination against women. And 54% do not see it as discrimination against women. So, and therefore, we also need a new convention for human rights of older persons, because not only it would provide us with human rights standards for all human rights of all the person standards, but also it would raise awareness of what it is discrimination, what is the nature of it, what does it mean intersectionality in practice. And I will stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anna, for sharing some highlights in the framework of the ongoing dynamics in Poland as a host country of migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees, or solidarity as well. Now, to continue, it's a pleasure to introduce Mr. Miguel Ortiz. He currently serves as immigration manager at Envoy Global in France, bringing over 8 years of experience in professional immigration matters. Miguel has worked with a range of clients, from private individuals to startups and multinational corporations, supporting their international mobility strategies and professional immigration processes. His experience spans consultancy firms and international law firms, having successfully assisted over more than 600 cases globally. Please, Miguel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ana Lucia, for the introduction and the presentation. Let me start by thanking UNITAR and you, Ana Lucia, for the invitation. For me, it's a pleasure to be part of this roundtable with all the other experts, especially to share insights and experience on this important subject. My presentation will focus on how immigration policies, in particular professional immigration policies developed by the states, help on the integration of older persons, and also how these policies help on their access to different labor markets and strategic job positions in companies. For this presentation, I would like to use more the concept of older migrants. And I would also like to point that I will speak specifically about economic immigration and not refugee or asylum, because those are two types of different fields. So I prefer to speak really on economic immigration and professional immigration policies. It is well known that migrants bring with them years of experience, specific knowledge, and a specific know-how. But also it's important to highlight that nowadays companies are taking less into account this category of population, because there is this idea of, we can say that young workforce it's better prepared. There is also this economic idea that young workforce costs less, so they prefer to hire younger people than to hire older migrants. Companies justify this because there is this fixed idea that the performance and the innovation of older person is not the same than younger workforce. In the last years, I've been working with French immigration processes, and I can ensure that immigration policies play a crucial role on the access of older migrants to the labor market. Each country has different immigration policies, and each country has the right to develop or to add clauses in each immigration policy to help older migrants to have access to the labor markets. Immigration laws in France, for example, they do not impose an age limit for a person to benefit of a specific immigration status. Let's say that this flexibility allows older professionals to continue having access to the labor markets and contributing economically without age being a limiting factor. It's important to understand that older migrants bring with them years of experience, and companies will benefit of these years of experience because this will help them to develop the different logistics and different operations of the activities. Age-open immigration policies allow the different actors in the economic system of a country to easier hire older migrants. Some countries, for example, they have developed processes where companies, they don't need to pass through a labor market test to prove their necessity of a foreign worker when the candidate to be hired is an older person. That means that the company that wants to hire an older migrant, they will not need to pass through this process to prove the necessity of a foreign national if this person is an older person or an older migrant. Other countries, for example, they have introduced economic incentives to companies hiring senior workforce. These incentives can go, for example, from tax reductions to tax exemptions, especially because when you hire a foreign national, there is an employer tax that you have to pay if you want to hire one person. So with this tax reduction or with these tax exemptions, people will be able to hire more older person and they will have these incentives from governments. In this way, older migrants can enter in a balanced competition with younger workforce because there will be policies that will help companies to hire this older population. There is something that is important to understand. It's that professional immigration policies can become tools of work inclusion for older migrants. A country where immigration statuses are not age-based will prioritize skills, experience, know-how, and specific knowledge in a field. And this will make that older and highly experienced workers will be valuable candidates for visas and work permits. For example, many immigration statuses don't even request a diploma, but years of experience on a specific field, so you can get a visa or work permit. Of course, this experience must be proved by older migrants. They, in their countries, has already had different strategic positions. They have already had job positions as company directors, or they have had strategic decision-making job positions. So they can prove this experience with work attestations, test of competencies, or test of technique fields. And this will help them to have access also to the visas or work permits. In this part, it's also important to understand that companies will benefit of hiring older migrants. There's not just experience and expertise in a specific field. There is the mentoring and the knowledge transfer. There is loyalty and retention. There are diversity and interculturality and broad networks and international connections. And this, for a company that is expanding worldwide, it's important to understand that they will have a broader network in the international by hiring the older migrants. So the companies must go beyond the economic logic of just hiring an older migrant and understand the expertise and knowledge that they will bring with them. There is a point that I would like to highlight is that the age-open immigration policies that prioritize skills allow older migrants to be hired, but also to create their own companies. This is really helpful because, as I was telling you, the older migrant has experience not just as an employee, but also as company directors. So with these policies, older migrants will be able to create companies as long as they can prove their experience in the activity field of the future company. So they can become company creators or freelancers. And in addition to that, when you create a company in some countries, older migrants have also the possibility to access to specific financial help. And this will not be based on the age of the company creator, but more on the nature of the company. So if you are a startup or if you are an innovative company, you will be able to access to this financial help. Another status that is more and more used by companies to hire older migrants, it's the company directors or legal representatives. Why? The answer is simple. It's because older migrants have experience on specific job positions and on strategic decision making. So that's why they are hired as company directors or legal representatives. And this will benefit the company because they will have all the experience of the older migrants in those specific job positions. And also, as I was telling you, it's the network, the international clients that they have developed for all the years of experience, and also the relationship with clients. Finally, It's important to highlight that for all the immigration status, there is not a condition of language, at least in France, because French language proficiency is not required to access one of these immigration statuses. That will make easier for companies to hire older migrants. All the non-age-based immigration policies help reduce the stereotype that older individuals are less productive or innovative and help to include them in the active population. Of course, the state should enhance support system for older migrants with language training, healthcare tailored to senior population, etc. All this in order to ensure that older migrants can fully integrate the new country and culture. It's important to add clauses in immigration laws that explicitly protect older workers from discrimination and encourage companies to adopt inclusive hiring policies based on skills, experience, and knowledge over age. As immigration expert, I highly encourage policymakers to continue refining immigration laws, ensuring that they remain age inclusive. And I also encourage international organizations to continue this kind of events to help raise awareness of discrimination experienced by older persons. Older migrants, like all individuals, have the right to dignity, equality, and the opportunity to contribute meaningfully to society. And from my experience, I can tell you that older migrants will bring a lot of opportunities to the companies that desire to hire them. But there is also this change of the idea on companies, okay, that they need to see what are the benefits of hiring an older migrant. We have to change all this mentality, and we have to change all these stereotypes that older individuals are less productive. Thank you very much, Ana Lucia.
Thank you very much, Miguel. We appreciate your views on migration from the experience in France. Incentives to include older migrants in the labor market are an interesting example to be applied in different countries. Thank you and all the best. Now, I warmly welcome Madame Chauria Fleury, independent consultant expert on the rights of persons with disabilities. She's a dynamic leader rooted in her African, indigenous, and European heritage, exemplifying Brazil's intersectional identities. With over 2 decades of experience driving inclusion across global and national programs, she champions diversity and leadership, empowering new generations of managers, including individuals with disabilities. Her expertise spans NGOs, UN settings, and partnerships with governments and corporations. As a former capacity building director at the International Disability Alliance, she continues to shape global policies and frameworks, ensuring impactful, inclusive change across sectors. Please, Chauria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ana Lucia, and UNITAR for the invitation. Dear Ms. Ebru-Kanan, Sylvia, and all colleagues in this panel and participants. As Ana Lucia said, I'm capacity building person, so I would like to ask you to allow me to use here an activity that we make when facilitating sessions with right holders. So I will need your imagination for this virtual activity that we call the game of life. I'm sure many of you already know that. In this activity, participants play different characters and navigate situations that reflect life's journey. We work a lot intersectionalities using this methodology. Depending on the situation, whether beneficial, like for example, a job promotion, or detrimental, such as a job loss due to organizational restructuring, characters move forward or backward, symbolizing the impact on their life trajectory. I'm simplifying here to give you a general idea, but now I would like you to imagine someone who experienced discriminations or rights violations early in life. Let's take, for example, a deaf-blind girl in rural Uganda who has no access to education. How will this affect her adulthood? And what will her life look like in old age? Likewise, when adults face rights violations, the consequences can persist as they age. The impact is not confined to one stage of life, but can last across their lifespan until we are old people. Let's return to the game of life. How would the life trajectory of a boy from rich family differ from that from a girl, a blind girl, let's say blind girl, growing up in rural Guatemala, who would be further along in our imaginary line, the rich boy or the blind girl in rural area in Guatemala? Let's use some few seconds to think about, but yeah, it's quite straightforward. Life is not always straightforward, and we all agree on that. Consider that something happened in the life of this rich boy who, despite his privilege, comes from a conservative family and is rejected after coming out as gay. Imagine that he ends up on a street situation without any support. How may his life unfold as he ages? Older people often experience discrimination throughout their lives, rooted in various barriers that prevent their full and equal participation in society. For example, we had Lolly explaining or bringing some examples to us regarding inclusive accessibility. This is not something that would affect Claudia, or I forgot the person that she named, but the woman in Amazonia, but it would affect her from early age, and even more when, or eventually even more when she would be older woman. So older people often experience discrimination that are rooted in these various barriers, the barriers that already the ambassador mentioned in his speech. And these barriers prevent their full and equal participation in society. In addition to that, the lifelong discrimination that older people face has also specific discriminations emerging strictly due to age. So when we are working on the field of older people, we have to consider lifelong discriminations that the person was subject during their entire life, but also specific discrimination. So it's very important here that we bring a theory that we use a lot on the field of persons with disabilities that's named twin track approach. We have to consider discriminations that persons faced earlier in life and specific discrimination that are based in the age aspect. The discrimination occurs when the personal age-based aspect interact. And this is very critical to understand. Discriminations are based on your own characteristics, but also on the interaction with social, economical, attitudinal, communicational, and environmental barriers that hinder their full and effective participation in society. As I illustrated by my colleagues before my presentation. It's not enough to simply recognize the discrimination older people face. We must actively identify, as already called by the ambassador, but also remove these barriers that hide their participation. This requires us a concerned action. We must take measures, and I was very happy having Miguel Ortiz explaining some specific action that he takes in regards to the migrants, for example. So a key action states may take is to ensure their protection under international law. While children, and now I would like to join some colleagues that precede me on that, we have to understand that while children, women, persons with abilities, migrant workers, people from various racial identities have protection under international law treaties, older people deserve the same level of protection. Their rights must be protected and safeguarded under international treaty. as called by Ambassador, and is advocated by Sylvia and the Geneva NGO Committee on Age for more than 10 years now. I remember in Geneva discussing with her 2010, I believe, or 12, and we are already advocating for international treaty on older people. So I would like that. I think that it's very opportune and welcoming to have these discussions, because more and more the intersectionality can bring support to this advocacy in order to have this international treaty. Ana Lucia, I would like to leave that here. I think that, yeah, it gives a good overview about the intersectionalities that I wanted to raise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chauria, for your examples. It's quite important to understand the context and how this can affect different persons. Now, last but not least, for a brief wrap-up, we have with us Madame Sylvia Perel-Levin. She's an advocate for the human rights of older persons and an independent consultant. She has been working in the field of human rights on aging issues and health for over 25 years with international organizations, including the World Health Organization and the UN Population Fund in Geneva. She was the former representative of the UN International Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse and the International Longevity Center Global Alliance that advocates for the adequate inclusion of older persons at the Human Rights Council in Geneva. She has also have a really strong role in the promotion of the a UN Convention on the Rights of Older Persons. She edited the book Aging of the Oppressed, a Pandemic of Intersecting Injustice, which was published in September 2023. Please, Sylvia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ana Lucia. Thank you, UNITAR. And we have been interacting in this series of on aging and mainstreaming knowledge of aging since its inception 3 years ago. So I'm happy to be here. I'm actually taking the place of my esteemed Michael Stein, who always does the wrap-up. So I do not want to compete with him because I think he's excellent. But I bring my grain here. And I understand that the questions and answers will be afterwards, or I'm wrapping up the panel, right?
After you will be coming the questions. Thanks.
Excellent. Okay. Because there were a couple of interesting questions that I think need attention. But just to wrap up, I mean, I think that everybody agrees, and it has come across the ageism as a root cause of a lot of discriminations that older persons face in life. And as Chauria said at the end, the barriers that exist at all levels in society came across through concrete examples that the speakers brought, from Andrea from the Amazonia, or the refugee migrant from Ukraine in Poland, and the need to raise awareness of their lack of knowledge on the barriers that actually exist, or the older migrants, or how age-friendly policies, I would call them, or non-age policies, as Martin called them, could be really a way to erase some of these barriers, or the deaf, a blind girl in Uganda, that Chauria. So these are examples of discrimination that can happen in early life, that they can intersect as one grows old and accumulate as one grows old. And the fact that this intersection and accumulation, and that there are no responses to them at the international law, or the international law, as Chauria and the ambassador and Anna and probably others as well have mentioned, the fact that of the fragmentation in the international legal framework, the lack of specificity, the lack of specifically of explicitly mention of older persons that contributes to our invisibility in the legal framework. And as Chauria said, I have grown old working on this topic, and I would like to see this in my lifetime still. I would like to see this a reality, and I don't think that we are at a good place. We are at a pivotal moment of really making a change. And after 14 years that the Open-Ended Working Group completed its work in New York, it is time for the Human Rights Council to really take up the recommendation of the General Assembly and move ahead with a resolution establishing a drafting group towards drafting a treaty body that we deserve, as has been said. But of course, sorry, I didn't mention as well the issues of the examples of the digital inclusion or the digital exclusion. I would say that it is one of the biggest barriers in these days when so many processes are done only in a digital way, and people who don't have the skills because they are excluded from training. Since they are excluded from the work environment, they don't have any training, don't have access to the tools, or because they live in a rural area where they do not have access to internet tools, so good connectivity, they are excluded from receiving appropriate services. So we all agree that we do need a convention in order to address these issues, address the issues of intersectionality. And I think that it's even more than just dealing with the issues of older persons. I think that a new tool like the Convention on the Rights of these persons with disabilities, for example, provided a lot of tools to the other treaty bodies, to the existing conventions, a Convention on the Rights of Older Persons that will bring intersectionality as one of the central issues or topics to discuss, will bring the issue of intersectionality to the other treaty bodies that at the moment they do not mention it. So what better than the intersectionality that happens to all of us at the end of life or at our last stage of life, to include everybody in the course of life, and the intersectionality that can be an excellent tool to help not only the Convention on the Rights of Older Persons, but all the existing conventions now that exist and that can therefore also deal better themselves with the rights of older persons as well as the new convention. I think I probably said enough, and I hope I wrapped up what was said. I hope I didn't forget anybody.
No, dear Sylvia, you did a good
Thank
job.
you.
Michael will be so proud of you.
Thank you.
Now it's a pleasure to give the floor back to my dear colleague Ebru for the questions and comments section.
Thank you very much, and thanks all the speakers. It was extremely rich and informative, and we have a list of questions, and I would like to, if possible, start with the reverse order, because as Sylvia said that she was interested in covering some of the questions in the chat box. So if I may start with Sylvia, if Sylvia, you're with us, I think, right? So you already mentioned that we need a convention on this, but even though, the question would be if there are other, important steps urgent steps that international community should take to address the multiple forms of discrimination for older persons. So if I may get the answers in 2-3 minutes, that would be really great. Thank you very much. Sylvia, please.
You mean in addition to having a convention, because a convention is an urgent, it's an urgent tool that we need urgently. And the fact that having a convention it will then it will trickle down into the national policies. So one thing that is urgent is exactly that, adopting national policies that that include ageism as a form of discrimination. And the decade of healthy aging was mentioned here, and the report on ageism was mentioned here. And really, the report on ageism mentions three areas of action in order to combat ageism. And one of them is intergenerational relations. The other one is education, and the other one is policies and law. So policy and law on its own obviously is not enough, but it is extremely important in order to raise awareness. But the other tools, education, because ageism starts from very early in life, education and to change the attitudes towards older persons, that is absolutely important. We don't learn how to age. We don't learn about older persons. We don't learn that as well. So that has to be brought into the education of adults, but also lifelong education. And having normal relations among generations, whether it is at the workplace and having older migrants and younger migrants working together, but in all aspects of life and in policy making, as the ambassador said at the beginning. So having the connections between generations, having education, including ageism, and changing the norms and then the normative aspects and laws and policies that make ageism illegal.
Thank
It's
you
a
very
way to
much.
go.
And of course, thank you so much. I'll give the floor to Cherry, but for sure, any convention should also, give us a roadmap for the implementation and multi-layered, governance, roadmap as well. So thank you very much, Sylvia. Please, Cheria, you were raising your hand, and if you can take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. I will be very brief, and is very connected with what Sylvia said, and also what with Ambassador said in his opening. I think that we have to get back to this understanding and also appreciation that we have our societies have a lot to learn with older people. Before, in older age, older people were something that societies really admired. And unfortunately, with the time, we are losing a little bit on that. And I would like just to recall the huge impact that older people can have in our societies, contributing towards it, like was said by Miguel, for example. And if we see the last report of the special rapporteur, the independent expert on older people, talking about huge issues regarding legal capacity, how older people are denied of their legal capacities, denied of more and more, denied the effective participation and inclusion in society. These are very important topics that we cannot allow. More we are seeing intelligence technology coming in, more we are seeing robotizations, more we are seeing young people disconnecting. Is exactly the gap that Sylvia was saying. The huge disconnection that we are having from the learnings that older people can bring to us. I think that this must be translated into the legal framework, and our society should be very, very attentive to these issues and translate that in public policies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sure. That's really important that you mentioned, and we're glad for that. And if we can continue with another question to Miguel, maybe as Cheria was, giving the sort of ball to you. If I may ask, there's this question, I think it really addresses your points. How do you think it is possible to mainstream the adoption of non-age limit immigration policies, and what direct incentives to do so should be to put forward among corporations and non-state actors?
So, sorry, Eber. I got lost the audio, so I didn't hear the question. Sorry.
Very, very quickly, thank you very much. The question is about like how is it possible to mainstreaming the adoption of non-age limit immigration policies, and what direct incentives we can think of like for corporations and non-state actors to achieve this.
Yeah, so as you know, each immigration policy is it states that will handle. The thing is that I think that we have to think that states and companies and economic actors have to link. They have to talk between them. Because there is a link between them. They have to talk and they have to see what are the important points for companies to hire the older migrants. I think that nowadays, especially in France, there is not this talk between the two actors. Okay, there are incentives, as I was telling. There are incentives by the states, but I think that companies they have still this idea, this fixed idea that older migrants are less performant than younger workforce. What are the specific incentives? There are tax incentives normally. These tax incentives, for example, here in France, there is a specific employer tax that if you have an older migrant, for example, governments can reduce this tax. Okay, they can reduce this tax. This is a direct incentive. There is also the exemption of labor market test. Majority of countries, they work with labor market test in order for companies to indicate why they need a foreign national. So this is a long process, for example. This is a long process, and that's why companies, they decide not to work with foreign nationals, because this process of the labor market test could last between 2, 3 months, 4 months. So they prefer to take younger people. So the incentives could be also to reduce the time of the labor market test, or just to exempt the labor market test to hire foreign nationals. After that, it depends on the countries. France is one country that, as I was telling, that age is not really a condition for an immigration status. So it will depend on the countries. I have more experience on French immigration. I know that in the European Union, the majority of the countries, they decided to give incentives to companies that hire older migrants, but it will depend really on each country.
Thank you so much, dear Miguel. There is another question to Anna. The question reads, based on your experience, what immediate steps can national and international actors take to address intersectional discrimination against older persons? And as far as we understand from all other questions as well, our audience is really very much interested in, the emergent and urgent actions that, need to be taken or addressed. So it also, presuming that we have a lot of, young participants to this panel today, I think this is a great indicator that, we create already an awareness about the urgency of this issue. So Anna, please, if I leave the floor to you, that'd be great.
Thank you so much. I would say the immediate steps which we should take is to take the advocacy work which is needed to achieve a new Convention on Human Rights of Older Persons. But additionally to that, we can also work on our regional level, which means to, for example, for Europe, it would be the request to the European Union to have an age equality strategy, which is missing in this legal framework for European Union. Other groups are protected or are visible in other strategies, and older persons are not. But what's now specific, it's really what is needed is to ask our governments to take actions, and to take actions soon, to be ready for Human Rights Council session in March, to support the new resolutions which would create, as Sylvia mentioned, this intergovernmental group which would start drafting, because this all would contribute to the real change. So this is what we really need. It is to start asking our governments in broader manner from each uncle to be active, to be proactive, to show them that it is needed and why it is needed. So this is what could be done urgently, and I would be really grateful for all support which we could receive from all stakeholders who are today or will watch this recording afterwards. Thank you so much for this
Thank
meeting.
you very much, Anna. There are multiple questions related to the digital technologies, the digital divide concerning the older persons. And Loli, if I may direct those questions to you, that'd be great. One of our participants asked about the older women and digitalization, and which is one of the most interesting topics that our participant raises. So what kind of data is available out there? This is one of the questions. And of course, particularly concerning the AI and the generative AI, all this transformation on that ground, how we can, consider or how we can locate this issue of intersectionality and the aging populations and this digital turn. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ebru. Yeah, I was having a look to the questions in the chat. And indeed, I think besides the work that at ITU we are doing on policy and promoting the digital inclusion in the different strategies and policies of our member states, there is another work that it's about the digital accessibility and the universal principles that should be included in any technology that it's developed. And when I speak about this, I'm speaking about ICT accessibility. And this is really very relevant in particular for artificial intelligence, because basically any new technology, any advanced technology should be designed with all these principles in mind, with these universal principles in mind. And it means as well that any development should be age-friendly and accessible. Mm-hmm. So at ITU, we really promote also this among our members, that all the developers should have this universal design and age-friendly technology development. And in particular, when these principles really are going to ensure from the ground up that these technologies will better serve all the different groups. So independently of age, independently of disability, of geographical location. And it will not only benefit, let's say, the digital natives that are the young people, the younger generations. And with this, something else that at ITU we encourage a lot among the members is the intergenerational dialogues. Because what is happening and what we have seen is that there are many new technologies developed by younger generations, so by some youth, tech-savvy youth. And this means that if we don't create the space for these intergenerational dialogues with the older people, then we are not really bringing this awareness into this younger generation, that every technology that they design or they are creating should consider also the needs of the other sectors of the society, such as the older people. And with that, a little bit as well answering with regards of the Wi-Fi. So when it comes to accessibility and access, we also touch upon at ITU with connectivity, so the connectivity barriers. So how we are addressing these connectivity barriers. So it's in particular for remote communities. So at ITU, we also encourage our members to use the universal service funds. These are funds that are specifically designed, and each country has this fund to provide in particular these infrastructure projects, including expanding the broadband in remote areas. So this is a little bit of the work that we are doing in this to support also this connection of new technologies with the older people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent. And we're looking forward to learning and hearing more about this in the upcoming days. Ambassador Aguirre, we waited, we made you wait for a very long time, but I'm actually very honored to have you here in this discussion. And apparently you really set an important, starting point for this panel. And I'm very glad actually to learn more from you. If I may ask, since you're a very experienced diplomat, and diplomacy is a field of, work which comes with experience, and it is in parallel with, getting, older and giving the floor to the younger generations, young diplomats. And so there's like a lot the young diplomats needs to learn through your experiences as well. And so the question that I would like to address to you, and maybe with this question, if you be closing this important session today, we will be really very happy. Coming back to the experience and the sector of diplomacy, where the young and the older, diplomats interact with each other, learn from each other, like reverse mentoring is also, something that we learn from our younger colleagues and fellows. How can diplomacy play a role in overcoming these, issues related to intersectionality in aging and ageism and what we have discussed today? I mean, just a wrap-up question, maybe, please, if I may ask you, what could be the role of diplomacy? Or if diplomacy should be transforming to address these questions? Thank you very much.
First, let me ask Miguel if they need an older ambassador in any countries where he might think of a possibility. But having said that, no. I think the very specific example here about what diplomacy can do is what has happened over these last 14 years with the open-ended group on working on age. That was all diplomacy. Those are member states. And fortunately, in the process, they brought civil society, NGOs, and in our siloed establishment, United Nations establishment, they brought different organizations together to discuss age and ageism, and that's a brilliant example. I enjoyed seeing Sylvia's enthusiasm about it and everybody else's, Chauria and Anna, and I really enjoyed it. One thing that has to be said is diplomacy is still a face-to-face work. You do it with the Zoom, and in the pandemic, everything is fine, but it's different to be working with somebody right next to you and just feeling how they're seeing it. And that is one contribution diplomacy has. It's difficult. We tend to do this a lot more nowadays. It's not the same, I would say, from my old age perspective, because in the end, after 14 years, Sylvia or others who have worked in this endeavor, I envy them. Will probably tell you that they've developed a lot of friendships and the common goal, the common effort is what has led them forward. The other thing is the intergenerational issue. I think it's important that we have that in diplomacy. Our ministries are structured to work at different levels. We work with young diplomats, and I work with young diplomats. I enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it all over my years in working, and just seeing them move forward. My young diplomats are ambassadors now. I look at them and I say, "Oh," and I wish I was there with them. Still, I keep asking them to call me, and I've been to talk to them. I've been working in training sessions with them, and it's still fun. But I'm really, let me finish with this. I'm very, very happy I got the chance to participate here. I leave this space with great hope after listening to Loli, to Chauia, to Anna, to you, and I'm thank you for to UNITAR, to Alex Mejia, to Ana Lucia Jacome for giving me the opportunity. It's really, really good. It's a good day today. Really good day.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It's our privilege actually to learn from you and all the other colleagues here. And we really truly believe that the role of communication, I wholeheartedly agree with you. It's never the same via Zoom, because we don't only learn from each other the knowledge accumulated, but we learn each other from each other, the protocol, ethics, way to behave and handle the issues. And this comes with a lot of experience, and this is we respect really. And thank you very much, sir. It was actually very inspirational to have you here and all the colleagues. And without further ado, I'll leave the last floor to Ana Lucia. Thank you very much again. And you brought us together, and this is a great effort. And with all your colleagues here, young colleagues, they set the floor for us to be together, and we really appreciate their efforts. And Ana Lucia, the last words go to you. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, dear Ebru. Before closing this event, by using the same channels for the previous events, we will be inviting you to the 5th and last event of our series this year, which will be focused on the protection of older persons in times of peace and war. It will be held on the 21st of November, at the same time of today, 15:30 Geneva time. If you registered once in one of the events of the series, there is no need to register again. You will be receiving kind reminders from UNITAR. Same as we did for the previous series, we will be sharing and publishing at our online portfolio the takeaways material of all the events. And at the end of the series, we will be giving access to certificates of participation per event to all of those who joined us at least 70% of the time, to be measured by the system. Thank you very much for your time. It's a pleasure, and looking forward to see you during our last event of this year. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
You, Ana Lucia.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.